Talagang alam na nila yun. We will talk about ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Is it still relevant today in a market-driven economy where competition is so stiff that almost everybody wants to be on top of each other? So we'd like to take you back to the 1960s when ASEAN was formed. And let's try to look into the demands of the region today. Now, ASEAN has expanded from 5 to 10 members, and now we have dialogue partners. We have China, Japan, and South Korea. We also have dialogue with Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and some other countries. Anong impact nito sa negosyo? Anong impact nito sa paggawa? At iba pa. Simulan natin. We have with us former Ambassador Rosario G. Manalo. Siya po ang nakasaksi dun sa paglagda ng Bangkok Declaration in 1967. And we're joined by former Ambassador Donald D. with the PCCI and the Employers Confederation of the Philippines. We'll talk about ASEAN. Madam Ambassador, ano po ang recollection ninyo ng ASEAN? Bakit ito nabuo? Why was it created in the first place?
Thank you very much for inviting me in the first place, and we'll try to do our best to recollect why we really had.
We'll have to change it.
Thank you very much, Melo, for inviting me, and we'll try to recollect the antecedents of ASEAN. Actually, the idea of a regional arrangement started with the Philippines way back at the time of then Vice President and concurrent Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Elpidio Quirino.
Oh, really? Pakilapit lang po ng microphone.
His proposal was to set up a Pacific Union. But at the time, the looming possibility that Indochina could fall in the hands of the communist sector. The United States was more intent on having an alliance in Southeast Asia rather than getting to have the whole Asia Pacific carry out cooperation in economic, social, and cultural affairs. So the efforts of President Elpidio Quirino came to naught. Despite also even he called the meeting here in the Philippines, in Baguio, it all went hayward. Anyway, eventually, we were able to set up ASA, made up of 3 member states, then Mafilindo, then back to ASA. There's a whole history of pre-ASEAN that will take us considerable time to explain, but let us now zero into ASEAN. ASEAN was set up on the 8th of August 1967 with the intention of getting, first and foremost, all the 5 member states who started it to get well acquainted with one another. You must remember that the decolonization period was beginning to wane.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the states in Asia had begun to be states, you know. But in Southeast Asia, we still did not know each other as Southeast Asian people. So the first thing was getting to know each other, an acquaintance. The second was, they said, with so many people and wealth, economic-wise, natural resources, we could do something better than just isolate ourselves from each other, but cooperate and coordinate and carry out our efforts to bring about economic growth in the region. And third, of course, to see to it that we should have no longer quarrels or disputes nor wars, but peace, security, and stability. So, since this was the first exercise of former colonial states, they thought it better not to pin each other down on a legal instrument, but rather have a declaration which was the ASEAN Declaration, an aspiration of the 5 member states currently and in the future, as they said at that point in time.
It's good to know no na ito pala yung nangyayari beforehand kasi syempre millennials po ako. So, millennial po ako, so hindi ko siya naabutan. Hindi katulad ng nasa table na nandun din. Pero anyway, just to also ask, a few years after August 8, 1967, ano po yung mga developments na nangyari with this association?
Well, the developments were simply kanya-kanyang kayod ang sinasabi nga natin. Kanya-kanya sila, bawat isa, nag-i-improve ang kanilang economic growth, development, pero we started to know each other much better. You must remember one thing, that the culture, the way of life of the people is totally the base for that nation to exist. Di ba? Eh doon nga, isa lang ang Christian state, Pilipinas. Ilan ang Buddhist states? Ilan ang Muslim states? Those five, okay? They have different ways of life. But that should, as ASEAN had said, that should not be an obstacle. It should be, in fact, a way of understanding each other and tolerating and cooperating on the basis of what we are. Huwag natin papalitan yun, di ba? That's why we eventually came to be known as the Association with Unity in Diversity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Pero how did ASEAN fit the role of being a regional group when it was also during the time that the Vietnam War was raging?
Well, that was, the Vietnam War was the quarrel between the United States. Johnson and former President Kennedy and Johnson got themselves enmeshed in the Vietnam War. And of course, the efforts of the former Indochinese states to get themselves out of the yoke of the French, di ba? Gera yon sa kanila, pero ang malakas na kumukuha sa kanila was the communist movement. And we thought that if we confront this slow incursion of the communist movement in Southeast Asia, it was necessary that we prepare ourselves, the five of us, to see how we can counter that incursion. And it went by economic growth and cooperation. So much so that when finally Vietnam fell, the Americans left, you should see the beauty of ASEAN. We in ASEAN said to the Indo-Chinese states, we extend to you the hand of friendship. Hindi na lang dinagdagan, gusto nyo ba o ayaw nyo? That was quite a mark in the whole world, that the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Singapore, the five of us, were extending a hand of friendship on what could have become and became a communist bloc. 5 silang communist states. But we extended to them the hand of friendship. In Southeast Asia, we are brothers and sisters. And it was taken well. Until that point when, nagpasalamat pa sila sa atin, when Vietnam invaded Cambodia. And who do you think worked out to settle that issue? It proved the significance of the five. ASEAN. ASEAN led the efforts on the part of Southeast Asia to settle the quarrel between Vietnam, Laos on one side versus Cambodia. And of course, France as the interlocutor on the other side, having been at one time the chief owner, siyang may-ari ng Indochina noon. Mm-hmm. And that's how ASEAN settled the Vietnamese-Cambodian War. So it proved that the five of us at that point in time were very effective in helping the region establish peace and security.
Okay, very well. All right, from the business side, ano po ang pananaw ninyo, Ambassador Donald D., tungkol sa ASEAN at Pilipinas? Ano po ang inyong masasabi?
You know, when all started as
Closer to the mic,
we were talking about ASEAN as an industrial complementation, that our economy would complement each other. Unfortunately, up to this time, well, we still are competing economies. I mean, that's the reality. Well, we meet all the time, but we know we even had this industry club, but these industry clubs actually are not active anymore. This now grew into the Business Advisory Council or the ABAC. But again, it is just purely advisory. I think the problem with ASEAN at the moment is that we have not yet grown and identified the regional concerns.
Regional concerns.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Ambassador.
Totoo yun sabi ni Ambassador D. But the fact is this, hindi ho ba sa capitalism, competition is the essence in the economic level? Competition is natural in the capitalistic world. And on the basis of competition, we are all 5, now 10 capitalist states, and we will compete. And that's why eventually, now that we have the ASEAN Charter, we have provided for a free trade area. Now, which is being developed and implemented by the ASEAN Economic Community branch, right? Well, to me, competition is the essence of capitalism, and it should remain like that. And we are going to operate through a free trade area. Free trade area is very welcomed everywhere in the world. In fact, the free trade area all over the world is the one that's trying to save WTO. Okay? Anyway, ASEAN has served, if you will ask me now, how relevant it is, it has always been relevant and significant. It has established peace and security in Southeast Asia, and it has reverberated all over the world, okay? That it has provided for economic growth. Look at the economic growth of Southeast Asia, okay? The slogan, unity in diversity, shows how connected the people are, even before connectivity took place with all of these new technologies that we have about us. In other words, it's a bloc, sub-regional in character, on which the rest of the world can very well be proud of and say, look, the 10 of them have really been very instrumental in spreading peace, security, growth, and social cohesion. Now, if the fact that we cannot have some commonalities everywhere is in the reality of things. That's why we are diverse. But we try to find commonalities where we can, and where we cannot, everyone is free to do as he pleases. That's why we never selected supranationalism. You will see in the Charter of ASEAN that the interrelationship of the 10 member states is intergovernmental, like the United Nations. So we have not surrendered sovereignty to any one of us, unlike in the European Union, which is totally different.
Some people say, I don't know your opinion about this, some people say ASEAN will go nowhere because European Union has gone astray. Look at Brexit. Look at its impact on the European Union. Coming from the business side, how do you look at it, Ambassador?
I think we have learned our lesson looking at EU. I think we should never try to integrate to that extent. What we have so far, I think we should grow with the present process. And it's very clear that we're moving towards that. We're working together. Yes, we are competing, but we also respect each other. So if you look at what's happening, for the Philippines, what have we gained? You know that because we were together in ASEAN, the pressure for us to do a catch-up is what is pushing us now. That's why I always say the next 3 years, this country will grow.
Okay, very well. From your side, Madam.
Alam nyo, we have always told you, we always receive criticisms, but those are with whoever they are who cannot get what they want. The fact is that we are a region with our own identity. The diversity that we have amongst the 10 of us, which means a cultural way of life different from each other, yet we can very well get along. And the fact that we have different governance structures, And the fact that we still were able to find a common ground for economic cooperation. We have always told the European Union, you are an inspiration to us, but we will never have you as our model. I've always said that. Why? Because the European Union's history, the member states, have a totally different history from ours. Their objective is totally different from ours. The Europeans have adopted what we call supranationalism. They have agreed that for them to have a particular kind of peace that they want, they have to surrender a certain degree of their sovereignty in certain institutions of the 27 member states to create one more baby Europe, and that's the European Commission. So much so that today, if you look at the European Union, let us say you ask France, what's your trade policy? You ask Spain, what's your trade policy? You ask France, what's your trade policy? We don't have. We only have the European Union trade policy. See? Or fisheries policy. What is your fisheries policy, etc., etc.? We don't have it. France and the 27 member states will say, the European Commission has a fisheries policy for the 27 of us. So a surrender of a certain degree of sovereignty in this way, in this manner. In this case, it's economic sovereignty surrendered to the European Commission. But it doesn't mean that the 27 member states are going to set up a union like the United States of America or German Federal Republic of Germany. No. When Charles de Gaulle was queried by his expert on integration, and the first foreign minister of France posed the question to Charles de Gaulle, qu'est-ce qu'on va voir comme une union? What are we going to do as a union? Charles de Gaulle gave the answer and said very simply, we are going to have an union de patrie. What's an union de patrie? A union of nations, not a union of states. Which meant a union of the people, but we still, the 27 of us will retain our identities as France, Italy, Austria, whatever else, the 27 of them. But certain of our policies, which we can give to the European Union, because it is better than each of one doing it, then we will surrender it to the European Commission. That is baby Europe. Now, as of this moment, the European Union is beset with Brexit. All right? If you study the history of the participation of UK in the European Union, under Thatcher, it was a great no, 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 but eventually they were convinced to join it. I think the participation of UK in the European Union has been of great benefit to them, and I think the referendum was wrong. I'm not a Britisher, but it would have been better for UK to stay in the European Union. Well, that is just as how I look it, and it's none of my business to interfere that I'm not a Britisher. I am a Filipina. Now, in ASEAN, we have a free trade area that is evolving. We started it at the end of last year. You know what confuses most of us is the word integration. Integration is truly the European Union. Ours is cooperation. Integration surrenders a certain degree of sovereignty. Cooperation, we don't. We remain as states. We help each other as far as we can. Yun ang nakakagulo eh. So, we have a free trade area. And let us see how, with the dialogue partners that we have, how we will go about with free trade area. Hindi ba meron ng free trade area now with China, free trade area with the dialogue partners, so many of them. How are we, that is the take-off now. Hanggang saan tayo aabot with this free trade area of ASEAN?
Okay. Will it be beneficial for the Philippines to be part of the free trade area? Ambassador Donald D., please.
We have no choice. They always say, should we go in? Free trade opens up a market. But the other side of the coin, where we have failed, is to make our economy competitive. That's the other side.
So that's the mea culpa. Mea
Yes,
culpa.
correct. But what the ambassador has said, it is important to understand it's cooperation, it's harmonization. We have harmonized all our tariffs. We're right now in the process of really expanding the single window. So this kind of integration, not in the harmonization of forms, of system is happening. So it will be good for us.
You think it will work with the kind of Bureau of Customs that we have today?
Bureau of Customs is something that it's a whole different story as far as all these those things that you're hearing.
Yes.
But, Bureau of Customs, within ASEAN, the movement of goods are very free.
Okay.
No?
Alam nyo, the integrated, which should be put in quotes, the united should also, I cannot find the correct word for this approach of ASEAN in the economic sphere, but together. That's a very good thing for the Philippines to participate in. But it doesn't close the fact that we could also do on some bilaterals. When we bring down tariffs and taxes down to the minimum level of between 1 to 5%, di ba? That will encourage the greater competition in the transfer of services and goods and semi-manufactured goods in the region. Because we create a very big space to do the trading. The question is, kanya-kanya na each member state should make sure that it comes up to the level nationally to be able to do the competition. Hindi na ASEAN na may problema yun. Bawat state na ang may problema. And we have efficient people in the government, the person of the Secretary of Trade, Secretary Lopez, the Secretary of Finance, Secretary Dominguez, and a very, very competent Nedaman. So they would know how to manage that.
Okay.
And I think they know.
Okay.
Marunong, alam nila nung gagawin for the benefit of the Philippines in the ASEAN economic community.
Now, I don't know how you'd react to this, but it's been said that 90% of foreign direct investments nawala kamakailan if we are to compare it with that of the previous year. And I don't know why it is. Why is it that Vietnam and Thailand and other areas in Southeast Asia ang interes noong mga mangangalakal sa halip na Pilipinas? Ano po kaya ang problema natin sa Pilipinas, Ambassador D?
Kasi whole po, hindi tama po na sabihin natin na wala. Because, yung tumaas yung investment there was just one particular big investment that came into Clark. That was the blip. But as a whole, we have failed to get our share of direct foreign investment because of our policies. Kaya nga sabi ni Ambassador, it is really our responsibility.
We should put our act together.
We should put our act together. That's why last week I said I was so frustrated. Because we always talk about peace and order, blah, blah, blah. We have not focused, or we forget to focus. That is the economy.
Okay.
And this is the best time for us to do it. We have a president that's a doer. So he's saying, push it. You have a team of economic managers that are very qualified. So yun ang dapat natin ipakita sa outside world. Not all of this thing about, drugs and all that.
But why is it that there is this tendency that we get to shoot our feet instead of somebody else? Bakit kaya ganon?
Tinatanong ko po, maybe the ambassador she can be...
Yeah, you're talking of good business climate, and yet somebody in Davao is saying there is destabilization, which the government has not confirmed, Madam.
Mahirap pong sagutin yan dahil I don't pay attention to national news, I pay attention to international news.
That's a good one. That's a good one. But, international news. Would you tell us ano yung posibleng reaction ng pagpapauwi ni President Duterte sa European Union ambassadors?
Na-clarify ho naman ng Malacanang na hindi naman the European Union ambassadors ang pinauuwi niya. Ang pinauuwi niya yung isang delegasyon ng mga alliances na hindi ko alam.
Nakauwi na po yata.
Oo.
Nakauwi na.
It is, maybe somebody should just remind the President na iba ho yung European Union at iba ho yung mga taong dumating dito. And it has been well clarified by Malacanang. Actually, maski the European Union representation here has clarified that and said, hindi sa amin ang galit ni Presidente. Ang galit niya ay sa grupong yun. Hindi kami involved with that group.
Pero wouldn't that create another controversy in the country's image?
Nasa nagbabasa na ho ng periodiko noon.
Okay.
Those people who read and want to create an image that is not proper for the Philippines, yun ang mga nanggugulo. But the government has officially stated that that was not the point.
Okay.
And I think it has been to the satisfaction of the European Union representation here. And they are happy with the explanation.
Okay. Don't you think it's about time for the Philippines to come up with long-range development plans? Because all we hear from NEDA as of today yung medium-term development plan, which will end by 2022. Why can't we be like Singapore na mayroong programa until 2030?
Because we are the Philippines and we are not Singapore. That's the answer. We are totally different in our, what we say, objectives. We are totally different from the way we do things. We are totally different in their economic, in the economic experience that we have. We are a democratic representative state, not an authoritarian one. So with this, we are different from there and from the rest of the other ASEAN member states. So we have something that is good for the Filipino people and for the region, which may not be, from the point of view of the other member states, the correct one. After all, we are the democracy, they are the authoritarians. But still, we can help and cooperate with each other.
Yeah. Ambassador.
That's very well said. I mean, what more can I add?
Pero yung long-term plans, don't you think we should at least have a vision? Of course, you have ambition 2040, which may turn out to be Bangungo 2040.
We have a vision. But anyway.
Alam nyo, sa amin sa foreign policy, we have a classification of foreign policy as follows. Immediate action and activity of programs, immediate implementation, midterm 3 years of the presidency, long term is 6. After that, we have a new foreign policy on the basis of whatever the new presidency or leadership would wish to have. So ang ating foreign policy, immediate action, medium range, and long range goes in accordance with the foreign policy of the one who comes in and becomes the incumbent president for 6 years. Doon ho kami sumusunod sa foreign policy. Sa economic, hindi ko po masasagot yun. Wala ho ako sa NEDA.
Okay. All right. It's the same, no? It's the same. All right. Sky, alam ko kanina ka pa maraming itatanong.
Sige.
When it comes to cooperation, po sa sinasabi natin, kasi kung titingnan natin, Singapore, Malaysia, talagang umunlad. So when it comes to the Philippines, paano po yung cooperation na sinasabi natin? How, I know we have differences in culture, pero how do we help each other? Pag ganun, ito po yung sitwasyon natin.
Hindi ko po alam ang sagot dahil that goes to economics. Hindi ho ako marunong economics. But I can give you something where they help each other. And this is very, very happy thing. Most of the ASEAN states are authoritarian states, right? But yet you find the ASEAN Charter peppered with human rights and fundamental freedoms. Nakita niyo doon. And we have now around 4 to 5 human rights mechanisms in ASEAN. Now, sasabihin ninyo, paano ho po pwede yan na may authoritarian at tapos may democratic And that's the beauty of the thing, you see? Despite differences, we find commonalities. At least us, when I was until a year and a half ago, the representative of the Philippines in the overarching human rights mechanism known as ASEAN, ASEAN, ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, we identified 3 UN Human Rights Conventions in which the 10 of us could well cooperate. The Human Rights Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Human Rights Convention on the Rights of Women, and the Human Rights Convention on persons with disabilities. And we help each other in various programs and activities to carry out those UN conventions in the ASEAN region. This is a way of pushing through and acknowledging the United Nations call for regional arrangements that is effective towards human rights and fundamental freedoms. 5 ho yun, 3 ho yun. At meron ng atal 4 or 5 mechanisms over and above what we have done in Asia. Meron pa silang the Commission Against Trafficking of Women and Children, the Commission for the Rights of Migrant Workers. Meron pang iba, hindi ko natatandaan kung ano.
Okay. Relevant pa po ba yung consensus building?
That is one thing that the rest of the world should not ever try to change in ASEAN. That identifies ASEAN. Consensus building was started from that very beautiful saying on the part of Indonesia. We are going to have what we call musyawara mufakat, consensus and consultations. Which means that when we make our decisions, we should not be voting. Hindi yun sasabihin, kung 10 kami, hindi yun sasabihin ng isa o dalawa, I object, wala na. Unfortunately, the young representatives we have been sending to ASEAN do not know musyawara mufakat. And they have the tendency of saying, my foreign minister says I object. I said, excuse me? And what is the alternative proposal? Nothing. It just says we object. Then you are not ASEAN. Because when you object, you are not so going to veto. What is your alternate proposal that the rest of us can negotiate with you and we come to the center and we have a win-win situation? Yun ang kailangan ituro. Millennials ba ang tawag mo natin doon?
Opo. All right. So, mahalaga pa yon. How do we deal with our dialogue partners? China, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, the European Union, the United States. Would you care to tell us how?
Alam nyo, if there is no value in ASEAN, no one of them will be with us dialoguing. The very fact that all of them are dialoguing with ASEAN means that they know the significance and importance of ASEAN. Okay. The very first dialogue partner we had was the European Economic Community. I was still running the ASEAN office at that point in time. And it was the ambassador of Malaysia in Brussels who called our attention on the existence of such a thing as the European Economic Community. Eventually, I was appointed as Philippine ambassador to the EEC. All right. And that's where I learned much of what the European Union today, it used to be the EEC, wanted with us. But there was one thing, we started with an agreement with the European Economic Community, which lasted, I think, for 5 years. But when we opened for renegotiations, like another agreement, many in ASEAN countries did not wish it, for the simple fact that the agreement was leveraging on the part of the Europeans that we should observe fundamental human rights and fundamental freedoms. That was no problem to the Philippines. The problem was the other member states. And of course, if there was no way of solving that, then there would be no decision. It would be rejected. Only very recently, I think, have they already reestablished some dialogue relationships. I don't know, I have to be corrected, with an agreement or without an agreement with the European Union today. The United States, the next one who became our partner was New Zealand. And then the rest followed through. But the United States is very keen. Japan is very keen. China. We have beautiful dialogues with these dialogue partners of ASEAN. Almost, I think, everywhere in the world, they want to dialogue with ASEAN. And that's a very good indication of the significance and importance of the sub-region of Southeast Asia.
Okay, very well. Why is it that some people are of the opinion that with ASEAN economic integration, it will be a race to the bottom because for us to attract investors, we should have lower wages? How do you look at it?
That's wrong. I mean, this is not a race to the bottom. What we're doing here right now is really upgrading everybody. In fact, it's the other way around. You are now competing on the basis of the resources that you have, the quality of the workers that you have, the infrastructure that you have. That's why I say it's our shortcoming.
Yes, please.
There are many commentaries and many people who talk a lot but do not know what they're talking about. I hate to say that. Sometimes, like Ambassador D will be in agreement with me. They keep calling for one currency. Excuse me. You cannot have one currency if you don't have an economic union. And an economic union will come about if you adopt the process of the European Union. We cannot have one currency in Southeast Asia. We have no economic union. We have a free trade area. So, bago mo buksan ang bibig mo, pakiaral muna yung sasabihin.
Okay, very good. We'd like to open the floor to our colleagues from the media who may have questions. We'd like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Alfredo Christopher Giang, Principal Assistant of the Office of ASEAN Affairs. But he's just here to listen and join us for coffee. We'd like to acknowledge our good friend, Engineer Bert Swan Singh. Thank you very much for being with us. Yes, questions, please. We'd like to encourage everyone to ask their questions related to ASEAN, business, and everything.
Tess Ramiro from the Catholic Media Network, at the same time, head of an NGO. To both ambassadors, thank you for the enlightenment on the ASEAN present day. Pero ang questions ko po, separately of each other. One, kay Ambassador Manalo. Ma'am, you're one of the pioneers of the HR. And right now, with the civil society forming as a group in the whole of ASEAN, do you think we CSOs in the Philippines have already achieved more or less a toehold, if not a foothold, on the entire ASEAN as far as civil society groups are concerned? What's your take on that?
I am glad that you raised this question, my dear friend. Ang katotohanan niyan, I have always said, up to this moment, that one of the weaknesses of ASEAN is the fact that other than in Asia, the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, in which we have accredited already, I think, 32 NGOs,
Yeah.
civil society.
Yes, ma'am.
The rest of ASEAN does a dialogue with civil society. That
Exactly.
is a shortcoming, that is a problem. You ask senior officials of the three communities, of the various sectors in the three communities, do you have a civil society organization recognized by you with whom you can have a dialogue so that the input of civil society could be there? There's none.
None.
Senior officials, foreign ministers, ministers of trade, ministers of finance, ministers of social affairs, etc., even up to the level of the heads of states and prime ministers, wala.
That's precisely my fear, ma'am, because this coming November, supposedly the NGOs and CSOs of the Philippines will be having a dialogue at the ASEAN level. So, anong mapapala natin doon, ma'am?
Alam nyo, sa ating sa Pilipinas, okay yan. Ang ibang bayan, ayaw. Sa kailangang makumbinsi yung ibang bayan. Kung NGOs nang i-exist sa kanila, bigyan nila ng pagkakataong makapagsalita.
Which means we will just carry on by pushing a little bit more the CSOs of the other
Ang
countries?
sinasabi ko sa NGOs na kilala ko, pumasok kayo doon. Hindi na kami makakagawa noon. Limited kami sa human rights.
Yeah, okay.
Pero kayo, sa civil society ng bawat bayan, umakyat kayo
Okay.
as a group.
So right now, as a group na mag-meeting sa kanila in November, this is good as far as you're concerned?
ASEAN.
Yes.
ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on
Yes.
Human Rights. Yes. I also think the ASEAN Commission on Women and Children, meron rin silang dialogue.
PWDs.
Ano na makakatawa nito? Yung pang human rights, doon ang nakapasok ang NGOs at we welcome them.
Yes.
Pero all other,
Wala.
na hindi as sensitive of human rights, wala ang civil society. Hindi ba weakness yun? That's a weakness.
Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you, ma'am. No, to Ambassador Donald, one concern po is the free trade. Okay. You're saying that we're saying that the how do you call this? The free trade area is as far as the ASEAN is concerned. Pero our governments, most governments in ASEAN are authoritarian. So what's your take on bridging the gap between the capitalist framework and the authoritarian governance? Paano pwedeng posibleng mag-meet yun eye to eye, sir, in your opinion?
You say totalitarian, but they're in nature, but actually in their thinking, in their approach, in the economic approach, they're really capitalists. No, really.
Really?
Di ba?
So where does that leave us as the Philippines? Kasi supposedly we're a quote-unquote democratic. I mean, you still agree that we're still a democratic country?
Yes, yes, of course.
Yeah, because supposedly gearing towards so-called, at least some people think, we're gearing towards possible authoritarian form of governance. Kuno. That's why I would like to ask, what's your take on it? And then at the same time, we're supposed to be pushing for free trade, pero parang wala. Paano po yun, sir?
No, there are some people who, again, the landscape is very confusing because some people keep on saying, we want free trade, but we also want our negotiators to accept that there's national security issues
Yes.
and that there must be a special and differential treatment.
Yes.
So, because the other side of the coin, free trade that is opening up market. But when you open it up, you have to be ready
Yes.
for the competition. And we're pushing that, governments start working on making this economy.
And you're saying we're not yet being pushed to that direction as of the moment?
We have the direction, the implementation is what's falling behind.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir. Yes, go ahead.
Alam nyo, kung titignan ninyong mabuti, the communism and the entrepreneurship ideologies are on the level of economics and business. It's not on the level of political institutions. On that, the whole of ASEAN on the economic level are capitalists. But if you go to the level of the political institutions, you have a democracy like the Philippines, which has been labeled by Farouk Zacarias as an illiberal democracy, and I don't know where the mom got that phrase, but I know we are a democratic state, and the rest are authoritarian states.
Okay.
All right? Now, sasabihin nyo, bakit natin we tolerate them?
Yes.
There's such a principle as non-intervention in internal affairs of a state. Just as we find it in the UN Charter, we find it in the ASEAN Charter. I can remember very well that somebody was raising the question with me when we were getting the ASEAN Charter approved by our Senate. Sabi nila, bakit nandiyan pa yan? Yung non-intervention in internal affairs of the state. Ang sinagot ko, simple lang. Sabi ko sa kanila, kung inyong makumbinsi ang 100 plus members of the UN to remove that phrase from the United Nations Charter, hindi ko
How much
ito
more?
ilalagas.
Yeah.
As long as it stays in the UN Charter, I can very well say it can be. Kasi hindi namin ma-assert ang human rights. Excuse me, ang sabi ko, tignan niyong mabuti ang UN human rights system. despite the non-intervention clause. So that is not a barrier to putting the non-intervention clause in the ASEAN Charter. But the other thing is that, hindi ko alam, sabi ko dun sa nag-question, how deep you are on political science. But the definition of state calls for territory, government, people, and sovereignty. Non-intervention in internal affairs of the state is the exercise of sovereignty.
Yes.
Now, kung alisin po ninyo natin yung
Sovereignty.
sovereignty, then we have no states. If we have no states, we have no ASEAN. If we have no ASEAN, excuse my language, what the hell are we doing here? Di ba?
Opo, maliwanag po.
Yeah, just a follow-up kay Ambassador, just one more. How do you push for the economic direction for proper implementation, sir? Kasi sinasabi niyo we're already there but not yet there. Paano naman? How do we get our economy primed up?
Alam nyo, nasa kamay na ho ng ating economists.
Yeah, that's why.
Finance, NEDA, trade, at kung sino man ho nakikialam sa economic component of governance, plus the business community.
That's why I was asking si Ambassador D.
You know, you won't believe this, but we spend more than half of our time pushing and dialoguing with our economic managers.
Really?
And I can tell you, this time, we have common understanding. We accepted the 12-point agenda, and we're pushing it. That's why I said this is the best time.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Maybe next time you point out the 12
Okay.
issues. Thank
Let
you.
me ask you, ambassadors, your excellencies, has ASEAN, changed or altered its views on cooperation because of the threats from extremists? We have almost porous borders, common borders in southern Philippines. Do you think it's about time for ASEAN to work together more closely?
In fact, they have intensified cooperation on transnational crimes. You know, alam niyo, yung pumasok dyan sa Marawi, ang Indonesia nagbigay na ng information sa Pilipinas about the arrival of the ISIS people, the Daesh, somewhere in Mindanao. And they are helping in fighting the Philippines in fighting the ISIS crisis in Marawi and elsewhere in the region. Intensified cooperation na ho yan on security issues.
But wouldn't this be a violation of the provision of our Constitution where no foreign nationals should be involved in actual operations?
Pag inimbita ho ng gobyerno, that is set aside.
Okay.
In other words, the Philippine government has invited its partners in ASEAN, magka-partner naman tayo.
Pagtulungan natin.
Pagtulungan natin. Hindi na ho intervention yan because it is an invitation and you welcome the intervention, in quotes na yung intervention, the cooperation.
Okay, very well. More questions from our colleagues from the media? Aya? Aya, tanong mo. Pat, sige. You have any other concerns, my colleagues? Sol Vancy of Manila Bulletin. All right? Tracy? Okay. Ano pong nakikita ninyong kinabukasan ng ASEAN? Let's say, 10 years from now. What do you see in ASEAN 10 years from now?
I don't want to portray myself as a...
Nostradamus.
But I think ASEAN will continue to exist and render its viability even more significant than it is today. I think the cooperation of the region, one whole block of 10 states, maybe hopefully by the time Timor-Leste could already be in, 11 of us.
Papua New Guinea?
Hindi ho Southeast Asia ang Papua New Guinea
Hindi na kasama.
Hindi ho, it's Timor-Leste.
Timor-Leste.
Papua New Guinea has never been classified as Southeast Asia. Timor-Leste na lang ang inihintay tanggapin para labing isa kami.
Okay. All
And I
right.
would say, if we don't have ASEAN in the future, we must invent one. That's how significant it is.
Would you care to add?
You're going to see a very integrated ASEAN. I mean, working together. we begin to see a lot of MROs, mutual recognition agreements going on. We begin to see a lot of small businesses going into ASEAN, especially in our fashion, in our furnitures, in our electronics. So all of this. And in fact, our thinking is becoming more complementary with each other. You know, it used to be when we had ASEAN meetings, it would be the Philippines together with most probably Thailand and Indonesia would be very, in our thinking, would be very similar, at least from the economic point of view. But when we meet with the Singaporeans, it's a bit different. But now, they're opening up as well. So you'll see an integrated ASEAN.
Yes, ma'am.
May I add something else? Alam nyo, before I left, I finished my term in Asia, the Asia Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. I was asked by my colleagues, Madam Manalo, what can Asia contribute towards the inauguration of the ASEAN Economic Community? Sabi ko sa kanila, bigyan niyo ako ng little time and I'm going to try to find out what is the contribution of women. Particularly dahil feminist ako, I took care of the women's rights. I went to AIM and requested then the dean of the Stephen School of Development Management, who was Mike Luz. Sabi ko, Dean, can you help me with a research to find out what is the contribution of women in the economic growth of the ASEAN space? Alam nyo na lumabas sa 95% or 90% of the economic growth in the ASEAN space is attributed to entrepreneurship. And in that 90%, 95% of entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs activities are carried out by the women in ASEAN. That ganun kilaki ang contribution ng babae sa ASEAN economic growth.
Really? Okay, very well. Yes, please.
Ma'am, Pat Santos, Tribune po. Morning, ma'am. You look like Nines Cacholo Bares kanina. Nagulat ako eh. Ma'am, kasi ganito ang tanong ko lang, ma'am. Hindi natin natitake up yung tension coming from North Korea. Paano titindig ang ASEAN once mangyari nga yung hindi inaasahan? Mag-clash talaga yung dalawang, paano titindig ang ASEAN? Napag-usapan niyo pa within, how will it work? So, paano?
I cannot answer that because that is a decision of the political security community. Only from my own point of view, hindi ho official sa Philippines nor ASEAN. Palagay ko po, from what I remember, and I stand corrected if I'm wrong, the 10 ASEAN member states have relations with North Korea. We have recognized North Korea as a state we relate to. I don't think we should get involved in this strong interchange between Kim and Trump. Maybe they deserve each other. We don't know. But ASEAN does not deserve the consequences of a negative solution because we are peace-loving people, love security, love everybody in the region and the rest of the world. So, hindi ko po masasabi how this end. Ang dasal ko ay it should end peacefully. Because the consequences would be just lahat ho tayo mawawala sa mundong ito. And I don't want that. Yun lang ho masasagot ko.
Opo. Meron po akong nakitang article noong May 16, 2017. Binanggit po ni Pangulong Duterte na gustong pumasok sa Asia ng Turkey at Mongolia. Was the President misquoted? Because we're talking here Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And I couldn't find any map that says Turkey and Mongolia are part of Asia.
Hindi po. Siguro po ang gustong sabihin ni Presidente, dialogue partner. Kasi anybody out of the ASEAN geographical region cannot be a member of ASEAN. But all dialogue partners are not in ASEAN, they are dialogue partners. Siguro ho, ang gustong sabihin ni Presidente why can we not invite Turkey to be a dialogue partner of ASEAN as well as Mongolia? And I think that is also as far as these two member states, if they are interested to be relating to ASEAN, they would go for dialogue partnership, which is the way we do things with non-ASEAN member states.
Maliwanag po yun. Thank you very much. More questions from our colleagues from the media? Yes, ma'am, please.
Thank you. Ma'am, you said that
Please identify yourself.
I'm Senny Tolentino from SMNI KLC. You said that women have a very big impact on the ASEAN. And since we have that big impact, what can women do in this current situation of North Korea?
What can women do? Women do not interfere in the operations of ASEAN unless they are representatives or delegates or NGOs with whom ASEAN dialogues.
What's just your, if there is something that the women can do, what would be your suggestion?
Me? Hindi ko na lang sila pakikialaman.
Okay. She's a diplomat. She's a diplomat. Okay. More questions?
Thank you.
Meron pa ba? Aya and company? Okay. All right. Let's look forward. Nabanggit na kanina yung tungkol sa magiging kalagayan ng ASEAN. What about the tensions in the South China Sea or West Philippine Sea? Would you have anything to say about the joint declaration, the conduct of parties sa South China Sea?
All right. One thing I want to make very clear to everybody here. I don't have to be anti-American and pro-Chinese, nor do I have to be pro-Chinese, anti-Chinese, nor pro-American. All I have to be is, first and foremost, pro-Filipino, because I'm a Filipina. What matters is the national interest of my country and my people. Number one yan. Okay. My approach is this rivalry on the South China Sea started between competition of the United States and China, China and the United States on the South China Sea's availability, whether that be for passage or whether that would be to show who calls the shots, or whether dominance, as my friend Ambassador D says, or whether the exploration of the resources. Okay? It's all of that. But wag ho tayo magpakamit ni sa isa, ni sa kabila. If ever, we should be friends to both, and in our relationship, get as much as we can in that friendship for the benefit of the Filipino nation. Now, let us zero in on China. China considers Southeast Asia to be her belly, just as the United States thinks of the rest of Central America, the Caribbean, and South America to be right under her belly, and on top of her is Canada. Just like the Europeans think of the rest of North Africa and down as the belly of Europe. Ganon yon, if you will see the images. So China, in a Johnny come lately, or maybe not, maybe she's been claiming that when she was still the Middle Kingdom, she was already running around in the whole of the South China Sea, has been saying that, okay, I will dialogue with China, with ASEAN to have this code of conduct, but it took her 10 years to finally come to just do the frame, to have the code. All it has as a declaration on conduct in the South China Sea. Now, I understand that the fact that it's just a declaration, and we do all know that under international law, a declaration does not legally bind member states, still, as much as possible, a state who signs a declaration has political aspirations that must be consistent with the rest of those who have signed the same declaration. So, even if we have signed that declaration in China, it's still, we cannot say, oy, China, you're bound by this, you behave. Hindi ho pwede yun eh. Because she will behave the way a state behaves. The national interest of my country comes first. But then now, has that behavior brought us, opened our eyes to what she's doing? Yes. Kung sabihin niyang, I will be building on these islands in this Sprat list, like the Kalayaan group of islands which is within this Sprat list. Ang sasagot ko sa kanya, thank you for building my islands. And I owe you nothing because you voluntarily develop it for me. I, the Philippines, I will not give it up just because of that. Okay? I will not also give it up just because China will say, where were you when I was the Middle Kingdom? Ang sasagot ko sa kanya, and who were you if you were the Middle Kingdom? Does not entitle you to own. In fact, it must be part of the open seas until the definitions of territorial sea and maritime waters are clearly defined between you and us. And hindi yung sweeping statement, bakit? Ikaw lang ba nag-exist before you were the Middle Kingdom? Siguro bago ka pa. Nag-exist na rin kami, hindi lang tayo nagkakakilala. So these are arguments that can well be discussed under a diplomatic umbrella of discussions without quarreling, without insulting. Just as friends, discuss. Like yung Baho de Masinloc, hindi ko i-give up yun. Saan ka makakakitang territory on top of Baho de Masinloc, yung kukunin ng China? What happens? Sa ilalim may extension ng municipality of Masinloc sa Zambales yun. You mean to tell me from there, papasok ka, ikaw may ali na ng Zambales? Hindi pwede yun. Pwede yung pag-usapan yan eh.
Yung continental shelf na tinatawag.
Ang continental shelf. Oh, but under international law, I am an expert in international law. That was my specialization when I took my master's degree. Hindi ko give upin yun. Ang sasabihin ko sa incheck, mali ka ha. Inaano niya, nile-leverage niya lang. Give up your claim to KGI, hindi ko pakikilaman ang Masinloc. Ganon yan. Diplomacy yan eh. Umupo nga tayo, mag-usap tayo. Ganon.
Okay. Ano po ang mangyayari dahil nagkaroon daw ng arbitral ruling last year? Ano ba ito? Isa pang bagay yan na dapat natin pag-usapan. Please.
Ito ulit, I hope I am not branded as a traitor to the country. But if you study very carefully international law, an arbitration was not set up correctly when we claim our right to the Kalayaan group of islands. I was breaking my brains trying to find out from international law books authorities what is an arbitration tribunal. And everywhere, an arbitration tribunal calls for three parties. The two who are claiming whatever they're claiming, and between the two, the selection of an umpire. And when arbitration is carried out, it is always voluntary. Under the UN Charter, it is always voluntary. However, in the UNCLOS, there was a provision or an attachment or something that made arbitration as a mechanism for solving compulsory under the UNCLOS. But the Philippines, when we ratified and approved the UNCLOS, we opted out of that provision, which means hindi natin gagamitin yung compulsory arbitration. We just didn't want it. All right. Without even us talking with the Chinese or wherever, equally the same, the Chinese opted out of that provision. So, both the Philippines and China cannot invoke compulsory arbitration under the UNCLOS because we both opted out. So what is the remedy? Dalhin natin sa UN. Under the UN Charter, which is voluntary arbitration. Philippines wanted it. Ayaw ng China. Voluntary. They say, you cannot tell China, "Hoy, you have to do it." Because, no, it's voluntary. So what did we do? We went and proceeded to set up an arbitration panel. That is not even an arbitration panel. That's just a Philippine panel handpicking the people who will render the very issue that we want at binabayaran yun ang panahon nila. Eh, ikaw ba naman kung babayaran ka at andun ka, hindi ba bibigay mo yung favorable position? That is the China is question. Now, I'm not trying, please understand, I'm not trying to be traitor to my country. I love my country. Pero hindi tama. Sino may sulsul nyo? Kayo nang draw the conclusion, ano? However, the very fact that that decision was given, it has brought to the attention of the world that we have a basis to do some claiming on the South China Sea of the KGI. Pero it does not bind anybody. It's just a position taken by the Philippines, and with the arguments we're giving, ito importante at bakit importante sa atin sa Pilipinas. But that's to me an opinion of a plus for us. But it does not bind China nor anybody else in the world. Ngayon, kung magkakaroon tayo ng new process of settling the issue, we will. Kaya, in this point, tama si Presidente Duterte. Itabi muna yan, at the proper time, ilalabas natin.
What about the mechanism for bilateral negotiation?
Yun na nga, bilateral yun.
Ito na yun.
Ito na yun, China and the Philippines.
Walang makikialam.
Wala nang makikialam. Unless, we invite others na makialam.
It was an idea of the previous administration to have a multilateral approach to the problem because of other claimants.
Eh, maraming gusto makialam eh.
At papakialamin
Yun
naman
lang.
natin.
Yung maraming makikialaman, meron nga. Ito pinakamalaki yung makikialaman.
Okay. Well, with that, we bring to a close another special edition of our Tapatan sa Aristocrat on ASEAN and related issues. Thank you very much to such a wonderful panel today. Former Ambassador Rosario Manalo, an eyewitness to the signing of the Bangkok Declaration of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and former Ambassador Donald Lee, who happens to be with the business sector. We'd like to acknowledge Mr. Alfredo Christopher Giang of the Office of ASEAN Affairs. So to everyone, thank you very much. Have a nice day. God bless us all.